This is Eric Erb from The Eric Erb Show Live. You can find me online at theericerbshow.com, twitter.com/The Eric Erb Show, on Spreaker at Spreaker.com/The Eric Erb Show Live, and of course Anchor.fm/The Eric Erb Show, and also on YouTube. Join me in my YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Eric Erb Show Live. Okay, like, share, subscribe if you like this podcast. Your donations are always welcome. Okay, let's get into the news. Got an interesting article from LifeSiteNews.com. That's LifeSiteNews.com. Dated Monday, June 8th, 2020. It's in the opinion section of LifeSiteNews.com. Why do Black Lives Matter? Not because they're black, but because they're human. Okay, I'm going to go down the article and we're going to analyze this here. Racism starts in the womb when African American mothers and their unborn babies are targeted for abortion. Many of the greatest defenders of and the proponents of stay-at-home orders and Black Lives Matter protests are rapidly pro-abortion, and yet their responses to COVID-19 and the death of George Floyd reveal staunchly pro-life principles. The entire narrative built by politicians and mainstream media following the government's stay-at-home orders was that we had to temporarily sacrifice our lifestyle and our freedoms in order to protect the vulnerable. We were told that every day that if we didn't have the right to endanger health and lives of others. Similarly, if other form of bodily rights can and should be temporarily restricted in a pandemic to save lives, then why shouldn't abortion, which always ends a life? Many politicians and pundits argued that social distancing and stay-at-home orders illustrated that your right to bodily autonomy should be regulated if your actions risk harming others, regardless of whether those orders were justified. This is the exact case pro-lifers make for protecting the unborn. A pregnant woman's body or bodily autonomy ends at the moment that exercising autonomy harms or kills others. Obviously, pro-lifers maintain there's a balance between the unintentionally infecting a vulnerable person at Disneyland and having an abortion, which always involves direct or intentional killing of a human being. But this only strengthens the case for regulating bodily autonomy when it comes to an abortion. If it is not unreasonable for the government to temporarily restrict a pregnant woman's bodily autonomy to protect health and life of her vulnerable child. Okay, I'm going to stop right there for just a second. I want to just say, for everybody listening to this podcast, thank you for tuning in, thank you for listening. And I'm just going to say real quickly with George Floyd's death, my condolences to the Floyd family, losing your son, George Floyd, and what was done in Minneapolis, matter of fact, what was done in Minnesota by the cop from the police department was wrong, and what he did was murder. Okay, there's no other way. I know after doing some research, I'm going to take a lot of heat for this, but I don't care, as I normally do on my podcast here. George Floyd had a list of priors a mile long, I think dating back to either 99 or 2000. He had stealing, he had arrest for theft, all different types of things, on and on and on. And I mean, he had lots and lots and lots of priors. But be that it may, he still did not deserve to be killed by the cop. And how does that all tail in and dovetail into Black Lives Matter? And I'm just going to tell you again, once again, that all lives matter. This narrative of saying that that only black lives matter, they're the most important, that's wrong. And in God's eyes, we're all children of God. All lives matter here. Okay? There isn't one race superior to another. Not whites are better than blacks. Blacks are better than whites. We're all equal under God. We're all equal. We're all equal in the eyes of God. And so this racism of just continuing that starts out the left-right paradigm that they want to keep us going and keep us fighting, and these groups, the Antifa and BLM, Black Lives Matter group, they're bought and paid for by George Soros. I've said that on this podcast before many, many, many times in different episodes. They're bought and paid for by George Soros, and even Bill Gates has a hand in the matter. And I'll explain that in another podcast. But yes, Bill Gates even has a hand in the matter as well at keeping the racism going. What it is a typical, just like a military strategy. How do you conquer the people in the United States? You race divide, and you conquer. And they do that by race division. And they do that by stirring up something, and something like George Floyd took place. And again, I'm not saying that do I excuse the police force? Absolutely, positively not. It was murder. He needs to be jailed for the rest of his life. The cops and the cops that took place in that, they're accessory to the crime. I totally agree there. But what I'm saying is other black lives over that weekend that George Floyd died, there was 12 black gentlemen in the city of Chicago alone that died over that weekend. Where's Black Lives Matter then? No friggin' where to be found. You know why they're nowhere to be found? That is because this particular case, the way it was handled, and the way that it was the narrative and everything that took place was the perfect opportunity to call in Antifa, the get Black Lives Matter going, to start riots, to burn down cities. Do you think George Floyd wanted his whole entire city burned down when he moved from Houston to Minneapolis? No, hell no, he didn't want that burned down. Do you think by burning down other black businesses that's going to help the death of George Floyd? Hell no, it's not. So the answer is none of this bullshit is related. This is all just set up and created, again, by the elite people funding the Antifa and the Black Lives Matter. It's all just a show. It's absolutely a show, divide and conquer. So somebody would say, well, Eric, well, where's that? What about the racism? I totally agree. Racism has been going on for a long, long time. And most people, and I'm going to just say this right up front, most cops, most law enforcement are good. Most black people, a majority of the black people, I trust, and I would want them to be my best friend. I have no problems whatsoever. A majority, a large majority. Same with the white people. There's good white people, and there's obviously down in Minnesota, there's some damn bad cops down there. There's some bad white people. But a majority of the white people I would trust, and I would want them to be my best friend as well. I won't have any problems. But again, it's a perspective of the elites. They want to make sure that they divide and conquer this nation. Every other country, I'm just going to say this, just about every other country, they don't let you carry guns. I think there's just a few oddball countries there. I want to say, I think in Switzerland they allow you to be armed over there, and different things like that in the country of Switzerland, but they're neutral, they're independent. There's just a couple countries, not very many at all, that allows their citizens to carry firearms. We're the only country in the world, pretty much. Like I said, there's a couple exceptions. I might be, I'd have to do a little more research, but there are a couple exceptions to the rule. But we're pretty much the big, dominant country. All the other countries fall under a dynasty or are governed by a dictatorship or what have you, whereby they don't allow their citizens to own guns. So if the elites can get us to give up our arms, they can give us to fight one another, they can stir problems up with racism, and they can buy and pay off Black Lives Matter, they can buy and pay Anti-NAFTA, Antifa rather, they can pay these organizations to start riots, then they know that there's an upheaval. Then they know that they can bring in their new world order. They can bring in their new world order and they can get rid of President Trump, which that's the end goal. They'll stop at nothing, as I said on podcast after podcast here on the Eric Erb Show. They will do nothing in their grasp to get rid of President Trump. So the bottom line is, how do we fix racism? Let's get back on track here. How do we fix racism? Racism starts in the home, and just like the article was saying, it starts in the home from the time the baby's born, and depending on the environment, the parents, so on and so forth, that's what that baby will perceive. That's what that baby will grow up. And that baby, if you're in a racist family or you believe everything in the world is against you and you're racist, well, of course, that's going to affect that young baby, that young child growing up, and then pretty soon that young man or young woman in life, and then they're going to go and they're going to start yelling and screaming and say, well, geez, it's been racist ever since I was born. How does this stop? This stops by people, and I don't mean just in the United States, I mean all over the world. You have to look at yourself inward, and you have to ask yourself, what am I doing? And you have to have a set of values and morals. And I'm not going to push my religious beliefs off on anybody. Most people don't know, and most people don't care. But I'll just throw it out there. If you have firm belief in God, you don't see people that have firm belief in God going out there and rioting and looting and stealing and throwing rocks and throwing bricks at buildings and bricks and rocks and Molotov cocktails at the cops. You don't do that because that's against their moral beliefs. They don't, it says that in the Bible, thou shalt not kill. That's one of the 10 Commandments. So what I'm saying is, if people would dig deep down inside and have just a little understanding, and just for 1 minute, just 1 or 2 minutes, just think of somebody else rather than thinking of themselves, and believe that there is a creator, a heavenly Father, a creator, Almighty God, most or all of the problems here that we're having in the United States and globally would go away. But then, I hear people saying, well, what about the Catholics? What about the Muslims? What about the Buddhists? What about this? What about the Satanists? Blah, blah, blah. Well, that's their deal. That's their deal and their issue. It says in the Bible, judge not, lest ye be judged. I ain't judging. I'm not judging anybody. I'm only simply kindly making a suggestion, in my own humble opinion. If you truly, truly reach out to your fellow man or your fellow woman and ask them how they're doing, and actually just talk to them and really give a shit for a change, just try once, just one time, and just say, brother or sister, I'll pray for you, and just pray with that person. And I'm not saying that that's going to end everything instantly, blah, 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 blah. But what I'm saying is that if you offer just to pray for somebody, I think this would start to make a dent in a lot of the racism and show that it doesn't matter if I'm white and you're black, or you're white and I'm black. It doesn't matter. We're all God's children. That's the name of the game. We're all God's children. Let me know what you think of the podcast. This is Eric Erb from The Eric Erb Show Live. You can find me on Twitter, twitter.com/The Eric Erb Show Live. Spreaker, spreaker.com/The Eric Erb Show Live. And, of course, Anchor. That's anchor.fm/The Eric Erb Show Live. Like, share, subscribe. God bless you. Stay safe.